Hello everybody, we'll just give you a couple of seconds to join and then we'll start the webinar. Okay, well, welcome everybody to our COP30 webinar. So the purpose of today is to hear about COP30, provide an overview, to hear about what Leeds are up to, what the delegation is up to at the event, and then provide an opportunity for everybody to ask questions as well. So we just have a little bit of housekeeping first. So first of all, you can put questions in the Q&A function. You should be able to see that at the top of your screens. And you can also upvote questions from other attendees if you'd like them to be answered. And we'll come back to the questions at the end of the webinar. We're going to keep all the attendees on mute unless we allow you to speak. And also just to note, this is being recorded and we'll be making the recording available on the Priestley website after the event. So moving on to the agenda. So we've got a pretty packed agenda today, so we'll keep things moving along fairly briskly. We're going to start with the context for COP30, and that's both political and in terms of the latest science. We're going to talk about some of the initiatives on the ground that the delegates are involved with, both scientific and talking about societal impacts of climate change as well. We're going to hear a bit about what it's like on the ground in Brazil at the moment, and we're also going to meet some other members of the delegation who aren't here today. And then we've got time to finish with questions and reflections from everybody. So just to kick off, a few words on what COP30 is and why this is so important. So these annual COP summits are an integral part of the United Nations climate process. And COP30 is the most important of these in over a decade. It's taken place in 10 years since the Paris Agreement was agreed. And it's about to begin in Belém, which is a working port city on the edge of the Amazon basin. So you can understand that the geography of Belém itself encapsulates many of the challenges that we face in terms of tackling and addressing climate change. And the location also emphasises, of course, the importance of both indigenous peoples and forests in tackling climate change as well. And at COP30, we can expect to see varied discussions on emissions cuts, but also on energy systems, on climate finance, on nature, and many, many other topics. And those decisions are going to ripple through global societies and economies. So we're going to dive a bit deeper now into some of these issues, and I'm going to hand over to Jason Lowe, who's one of the chairs of our UNFCCC task force at Leeds, to talk more about why Leeds is involved. So Jason, the floor is yours, and over to you.
Thanks, Debbie. Great, you've put my slide up. So it's great to see so many people online. Very much welcome. I think COP is one of those times of the year when what we're doing at the university and in academia really touches the public consciousness. Even my 14-year-old daughter has been asking, what's COP? What's happening? What can we do? What can we feed in? And I think it's a real opportunity for the University of Leeds in so many different ways. We've been getting involved at actually quite a significant level of effort in COP since COP26, when it was held in the UK. And I think we learned lots of lessons around that we've been trying to refine ever since. But why do we do it? So firstly, University of Leeds is an official observer to the United Nations process around climate change, the UNFCCC. And it's important that we do play a role in that process. As an observer, we're there to really hold the parties to the process to account. So we play a vital role along with other actors. Also, I think we have so many links from the university into the nations attending COP that thinking about our role and responsibility to influence global policy, it's absolutely vital, as well as being exciting. COP is an opportunity to showcase and support research and innovation. And we'll hear a little bit later, I think, from peers on a project that looks at indicators of global climate change. But there are many other projects that are so directly relevant, such as Amazon Face, which also involves University of Leeds scientists. That particular project, it's very local to Brazil in that it's looking at how forests change in terms of tree growth, exchange of water, as CO2 varies. Some of that fundamental understanding, surprisingly, doesn't yet exist, and Leeds is part of that. It's also increasingly important for student experience. So it feeds into education and student experiential learning. Now, not everybody can go to COP. There are a limited number of places, and it's important we think about our carbon budget as well. But there are multiple ways of interacting. Some of those we'll hear about as we go through to meet the delegation. But this year, I've had the pleasure of leading one of the capstone projects and looking at our MSc students as they think about the role of COP and UNFCCC processes. There have been some brilliant dissertations on that. It's also important for wider knowledge exchange and partnerships. Many of our important partners are attending COP, and it's also an opportunity to meet new partners, especially from the global south and nations that might benefit from what we're doing at the University of Leeds. And then finally, so Piers and I were both at a really interesting event yesterday for the launch of a Royal Society report. And I had a long conversation afterwards with one of the senior officials in the Department for Energy and Net Zero. And we talked about how universities can amplify UK leadership on climate. And I think what we present and what we deliver and how we engage with COP is a really good contribution to that. So over the past few COPs, I'm listing the ones that go from COP27 here, how we engage has evolved. We have tended to showcase a range of projects. One of these I was involved in myself, the development of the co-benefits tool. But what we've done is we've gone increasingly broad and taken that view that we want to represent interdisciplinary science and activities in the university, not just physical science. We've also seen our first undergraduate student attend one of the COP events, which I think was actually a very important milestone. And now we're building up to not only going to COPs, but going to other related UN activities that happen throughout the year. With that, I'm going to hand over to Richard to talk about some of the specifics of the framing of this year and the geopolitics.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Just to reiterate what Jason was saying, it's great to see you all here. And I think what Jason's saying about how we can amplify UK leadership, whatever the ups and downs, is really, really important. Thank you, Jason. So just quickly on the geopolitical context, and then a few words on the Paris Agreement. I'm going to go fairly summarily. I think firstly, it's important to say the COP30 Belém, it sits clearly between two worlds, yes, the one that we've been used to, which is liberal and multilateral, and the one that seems to be emerging, though it's going back and forwards, ebbs and flows, which is at its extreme, nationalist, illiberal, and centrifugal. I think COP30 is within the UNFCCC activities as a whole, but within the broader multilateralism, global multilateralism, it is a diplomatic test of the age we're in. And I think that is where its importance, not just with regard to climate, stands. There are obviously very important things going on, which is constraining climate negotiations. Yeah? The ongoing Russian war in Ukraine, the Middle East crisis, particularly the absolute crisis in Gaza. Energy markets, even if they're transitioning within the overall energy transition, they're very risk prone. so that whilst the language of energy transition is growing and is becoming stronger, the language and the reality of fossil fuel phase down, and we know the fossil fuels are about 80% of greenhouse gas emissions, it's just very hard at the moment with the cost of living crisis and fiscal constraints working within this geopolitical context. And therefore the populist counter-order that we're all living at the moment, where governments, particularly in Europe, but also in Asia, Latin America, and as we know in the US, they're increasingly framing climate rules which are out of the Paris Agreement as threats to sovereignty and or affordability. And therefore we are witnessing a pushback on NDCs and net zero ambition. And then the debt distress among low-income countries, yeah? Grant-based finance, not just simply concessionary loans, grant-based finance is becoming a geopolitical issue. It's not only a justice issue. The political stability and energy security of countries like Burundi, Sudan, Ethiopia, Grenada, Laos, they are critical, and they will be increasingly so within the regional and geopolitical dynamics of the world that we're in. The end of hegemonic climate leadership. Clearly, the US was always an ambivalent US climate leader, but it was very important in framing the Paris Agreement, in rehearsing its transparency rules, and it has at each COP been important in launching coalitions from the COP platform, I think particularly, but others will have other examples of clean energy and methane. The influence is shifting as it's shifting towards the south, and that is very interesting in itself and is a positive thing in many ways. We may see, for example, an axis at COP30 between Brazil, the European Union, Africa, and the small island states. In this, China is obviously pivotal, but for the moment it remains transactional. Its climate diplomacy is issue by issue, it's issue driven. It isn't yet facilitating a new form of global multilateralism. Maybe that will come. And then finally, on the Brazilian COP presidency itself, I think it's important that we remind ourselves that this is a COP about implementation. Yeah, and it's very important what kinds of coalition packages around the sectors emerge. I think particularly, yeah, not only of credible finance delivery, the NDCs themselves, but methane, forests, tenure finance, the securing of indigenous rights to land expropriation, and Article 6 integrity. So that COP6 background. Next slide, please. The Paris Agreement, I'll be quick. In my time, yeah, it is important to remember, yeah, if you think back to what Jason was saying, you know, what was the Paris Agreement? We are 10 years on, we are wanting to celebrate it, clearly with ambivalence, but what it built was a universal framework, a quite extraordinary achievement. Yeah, bottom up, unlike the Kyoto Protocol, all countries on the planet working towards mitigation targets that are shared, yeah, and with clear temperature goals. An ambition cycle. I think the architecture was critical. Yeah, national mitigation targets, NDCs, rehearsed within transparency processes towards a stocktake. The first one was in Dubai in 2023, that leading again to, within a 5-year cycle, further NDCs and a ratcheting up process towards a overall net zero target. And then finally, you know, the terms of multilateralism were set out, yeah, of cooperation and adaptation. Yeah, Article 6 mechanisms of international cooperation between developed and developing countries with, for example, transfer of GHG emission credits. I'm not going to go into the greenwashing there. I think it was an important mechanism. High ambition, Paris-aligned targets, as I said, robust accounting and transparency, critical to the way in which climate multilateralism can work. And then finally, the Paris Agreement, the first global goal on adaptation, which has become so important with regard to mitigation and resilience. What Belém will test, well, there are obviously a lot of things that will test, and I'll hand over very shortly to others who will talk about this. It is a system under stress. We all know that. What should we be watching out for? For me, particularly, clearly the NDCs, the synthesis report come out this week under the UN, says that there are only 64 countries that have submitted so far out of 195 with regard to 2035 ambitious targets. We are, and Piers will come to that, in an overshoot situation by the early 2030s. Therefore, 1.5 is now a long-term alignment. Clearly, there is
30 seconds, Richard.
Right. Finance and trust, the scaling up of finance to 1.3 trillion through the private sector and blended finance, delivery of the energy packages, and then the question of the enhanced transparency framework and the role of indigenous peoples, particularly under the framework, and Matthias will come to it, of Mutirao. The role of indigenous peoples and general civil society engagement will be critical for us to see how stressed the Paris Agreement is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. That's fantastic. We're now going to move on to discuss some of the science that will inform some of the discussions at COP30. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Piers. So Piers, please introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about the latest findings.
Okay, Debbie, can we go to the next slide? Good. Yes. So what I want to talk about is trying to get our research into the negotiations, and this is an example which isn't some of my own research, but it's one of these reports that do come out before the COP negotiations to try and feed in that evidence. This is what this group of organisations thought it was important for the COP negotiators to understand. So the first is we had very big increase in the surface temperature change, which is sort of what the high kind of produce. But we then had this idea that we're seeing accelerated warming in the ocean. We're seeing the carbon sinks of the kind of Amazon and things coming under and stress that perhaps they can't continue to absorb carbon dioxide the way they're doing currently, and other climate impact as well. Could you go on to the next slide, please, Debbie? Plus, they talk about things that are of more direct impact, things like outbreaks of kind of mosquitoes causing dengue, and towards more policy relevant discussion, like what are the possibilities for technologies like carbon dioxide removal, and for what are effective policies on carbon offsetting, or what different combination of policies can be most effective. So what this report tried to do was to try and distill the research into things that might influence the COP decisions. And I think it'd be interesting to think about what would be the things that we would want to communicate that come from our own community, and what would be the things that we'd want to put in front of them. Could you go on, please, Debbie? But I sort of want to talk about some of my own work that I'm involved with to try and feed in the science directly into the negotiations. So this is the indicator climate change project. So we are the international group of authors from that IPCC that want to produce an update to the IPCC report, and we're particularly targeted. So we publish a report in June annually, and this targets the bond intersessional part of the COP negotiations. So the kind of technical negotiation that occur each year in Germany. Could you go on to the next slide, Debbie? Oh, yeah. Yeah. And this will work quite well this time about, and because we presented these results in Germany to the negotiator then, we have been particularly tasked by the EU, the UK government, and the Norwegian government to present our results at the Earth Information Day at the actual COP negotiations. So this is presenting to the entire COP and 196 different kind of countries. So we have a 10-minute slot to really present our results to everyone, to try and get some of these key updated scientific information directly into the COP cover text, which is the ultimate text that gets approved at the end of the COP negotiation, touch wood. So we're trying to give them an update of the most timely climate science. Could you go on, please, Debbie? And what we're trying to do with them is to get this sense of urgency about how things are changing. So this shows a graph of the way some of these key indicators we're looking at, like the surface temperature change and things, the way they have changed since the IPCC report was produced. And the idea there that we do not want the negotiators to always refer back to the last IPCC report. We want them to really have on their top of their negotiating decision, their choices, really what's happening currently. So you can see things have changed quite a bit since the last IPCC. Could you go on, please, Debbie? And I just talk about two of the key things we'll be presenting. The first is just this estimate of the human contribution to climate change. So this is a key thing that determines how far we are with the Paris 1.5 degree temperature target, but we need to do an update of it compared to last IPCC, and we see it going up. This is the average human-induced temperature change over the last 10 years. And it's gone up from about 1.1 to 1.2 degrees, and we're getting close to 1.5 degrees, of course. And the other thing we've seen a big increase in is this energy imbalance term, and that is the whole amount of energy that's being absorbed by the Earth system at any one time. This is all the extra heat that's going into the ocean, the cryosphere, and the land surfaces. It's increasing much faster than it was, and we're trying to understand why it's going up. And the whole point of presenting this is to try and give the policy making community this whole sense of urgency that they have to get on with it, and today. Please, could you go on? Or perhaps that's the end of my talk. That's the end of my talk. Yeah. So I think what we're trying to do, we're just, I mean, it sounds a bit dull in some sort of way, but we are trying to get the policymakers this consistent set of very authoritative information in which to make their decisions on.
Thank you, Piers. I think that time's up, bang on time. So thank you ever so much for those insights. I'll just remind everybody before we move on that you can post questions in the Q&A function. So do think of anything that seems to mind that you'd like to ask the delegation as well. And moving on from the science behind some of the discussions, Leeds will also be involved in a lot of other events at COP30, including our official UNFCCC event. And Ruth is going to tell us a little bit more about that now. So Ruth, over to you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, great to see so many of you here this morning. My name is Ruth Smith. I'm a research fellow in the School of Earth and Environment and part of the Priestley Centre for Climate Futures. So at COP30, we're going to be representing University of Leeds in a side event called Unlocking Food Systems Change Through Farmer-Led Research and Policy Innovation. So this event links directly to our new project, which is called Voices for a Just Rural Transition. This is a 4-year, £4 million project funded by the UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. And for this, University of Leeds have partnered with Climate, which is a Netherlands-based think and do tank focused on climate-smart food systems. So Voices for JRT is all about making sure that the people most affected by climate and agricultural change are also part of shaping the policies and the decisions that govern those systems. So University of Leeds has quite a long history of research on food systems and rural livelihoods and climate justice through projects, for example, Foster Health, which is food systems transformation in Africa for One Health, which is the project I currently work on. We try to show that farmers are not just, these kind of beneficiaries of change, but they're really key agents in the transformation itself. But often their knowledge and their lived experience aren't really reflected in these kind of high-level policy debates. And this is especially relevant in COP itself because we've seen lots of criticism over recent years of COP becoming, quite rightly said, becoming increasingly dominated by governments, corporations, less space given to civil society and those kind of marginalised voices. And that's exactly why initiatives like Voices for JRT matter. They're trying to bridge that gap by creating genuine pathways for marginalised farmers, women, youth, Indigenous peoples to contribute their perspectives and priorities directly into these kind of policy conversations. So the project Voices for JRT is just beginning. We're in our first pilot year, and for this year we're going to be working in Brazil, Tanzania and Indonesia, with civil society organisations in each country to try to capture through quite participatory and creative methods diverse rural perspectives around food systems change, bringing those into national debates and policy fora such as COP. So the event that we're hosting with COP, we're obviously partnering with Climate, who we're leading on the project with. Also, for the event, we've partnered with AgriAccord, which is a global alliance supporting farmer organisations for sustainable agriculture, Wageningen University and Research, which is based in the Netherlands, SACAO, which is the Southern African Confederation of Agricultural Unions, a farmer union, and the Alliance of Biodiversity International and the International Centre for Tropical Agriculture. And we're also going to have government partners from itself and from Vietnam. I'll be attending virtually a COP, but we'll have peers representing Leeds in person at this event. And together, the event is aiming to explore how farmer-led research and participatory approaches can shape more equitable agricultural policy and climate finance. So in other words, how can we try to shift from these kind of more top-down solutions to these more bottom-up innovations, and where the people who are most affected by this change are kind of generally part of designing the solutions that we work towards. So why are side events quite important? So they don't often get as much attention, of course, as the main negations, but they're often where a lot of the real exchange of ideas can happen as well. They bring together researchers, policymakers, farmers, and NGOs in one space to share evidence, test ideas, and build partnerships. And we're very happy that in our side event, we've also ensured that we're going to have representation from the civil society partners we're partnering with in this first year. For Leeds and the Priestley Centre, it's a chance to showcase our commitment to climate justice and to inclusive transitions, to show that universities can also play quite an important role in helping to connect science with practice and elevate those kind of voices that might be missing from these debates. So in short, this side event is focused on connecting the kind of local voices with these global policy fora, linking lessons from community-led research and making sure that they inform the policy processes. And it's also about showcasing Leeds as a as a thought leader in these kind of just transitions and showcasing the amazing work that we do across the university, using different types of participatory approaches to climate and food systems change. Yeah, so thanks so much. Happy to answer any more questions on the event, and I'll hand back over.
Thank you, Ruth. That's great. Sounds fantastic, and good luck with the event as well for all who've taken part. So now we're going to move to find out a bit more about what's happening on the ground in Brazil itself. So Mateus, please introduce yourself, and over to you.
Bom dia, good morning to everyone. I'm in Brazil right now. And what I'm going to be speaking is going to be about Brazil itself. So one thing that I think is positive in Brazil is bringing local food to COP. So for who is coming to Brazil, we are going to have tacacá, açaí, jambu, like traditional food from the north of Brazil, which is really positive. And all this food is going to be collected and sent by family agriculture, which is really sustainable. And for me, this is really positive. So if you have a chance to go to Brazil, please try Brazilian food, and it's the best in the world, I promise. The other thing that I want to say is the indigenous participation at COP, which is the most positive. I got this data when I was speaking with the presidency of COP30. They are planning to bring 3,000 indigenous people and make like a village of indigenous in the University of Belém do Pará. And the Sônia Guajajara, the indigenous minister of Brazil, she want to bring all the indigenous into COP to watch and see the negotiations and participate as well, which is amazing. Just one fun fact, the biggest participation of indigenous people at COPs was in the COP28 with 350 people. So now we are going to have 3,000 from Brazil. We don't know how many is going to be outside, but from Brazil is going to be 3,000, which is amazing. And I'm really positive about the COP in the Amazon because you guys can see the forest, the Amazon closer, and you guys can see how amazing is Brazil. So I'm really positive. Lula also want to bring Trump to COP. He said if he can, he's getting the plane to the United States and bring him. So let's see if this is going to happen or not. And the capital of Brazil is going to be in Belém for the next 3 weeks. So Lula is going to be there for most of the time. So this is good. So now I'm going to go to the challenge, which is the most realistic ones. I'm just going to start from the negative perspectives of COP from the Brazilians, exactly from Belém. Brazil is has a massive inequal society, you know. In Belém, for example, you have a place in the center where rich people live, the houses are like millions of reais, and also there are poor people that lives in favelas in Belém, which are excluded from the COP, you know. One thing that I can say that's the best thing in this COP is the green zone is going to be open for everyone, for the public, which the Brazilians can participate and anyone can participate, and it's going to have a lot of side events. But at the same time, for example, all the trash, I don't know if the right word to say, is going to the favelas, is going to the rivers. So this is not good, you know. And
1 minute to go, Mateus.
1 minute, oh my God. I was speaking with some locals, and the locals said that it's a lot of traffic. The kids are 3 weeks without going to the school, so they have to work. They cannot look after the kids. So the COP30 is impact negative the people from Belém. Now I'm going to speak about the petrol in the Amazon. 3 weeks ago was approved the petrol in the margins of the Amazon, which is really negative. This is going to bring 13.5 billions of tons of CO2 to the atmosphere. Brazil last year emitted 1.2 billion of tons of CO2 in 2024. This because of deforestation, and this is really serious. We should be speaking about not using petrol, not drill, but we are going this way. And I was thinking this morning, what's happened if it was Bolsonaro? No one was going to approve. Everyone was going to be negative about this, and for me, was going to have a lot of protests across the globe and also in Brazil. But it's Lula, so I can see that this is really negative. And just if I can speak really quickly about the tipping point, sorry, maybe 5 seconds. If Brazil like cut the forest for between 20 to 25%, the Amazon can become a savanna. And Brazil depends on the Amazon because the Amazon produces water, and this water goes to all the South America with the climate rivers. So the flying rivers. These flying rivers are like rain that's produced by the Amazon, and it goes all across Brazil. And we produce all the food from the waters of the Amazon. So I've been as quick as I can. So obrigado. Okay. Any questions? Just send it on the chat, and I can explain much more. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mateus. It's absolutely fascinating, and hopefully we'll have some time to come back to you in the Q&A as well, because there's lots and lots going on there. So obviously at the university, we are very interested in youth perspectives and youth engagement. So I'm going to hand over now to Trina to tell us a bit more about that.
Thank you so much, Debbie, and thank you everyone for the presentations which preceded me. It's all super interesting and great to hear about the work done at the university. Yeah, so I'm Trina Flesher. I am one of the youth representatives to the UNFCCC task force at Leeds alongside Mateus, who you just heard from. As a bit of background, our roles bridge the student body at Leeds and the UNFCCC, intended to kind of make the climate politics of the UNFCCC more accessible to students through things like comms work, like we're doing today, and also supporting students who are attending the conference. We're still kind of in the early stages of these roles, but I hope that you can hope to see more from us soon. Things like integrating UNFCCC politics into teaching at the university a wee bit more, interviewing stakeholders who work in international climate policy to sort of demystify their activities, and also promoting the work of student researchers and activists on climate. Young people play a central role at the UNFCCC because they centre moral principles like climate justice and equity in the negotiations, and they've been really essential for embedding those norms at COPs and the climate policy which flows from it. In a more personal capacity, I am a PhD researcher in loss and damage, which is the part of international climate law which governs the impacts of climate change. And it's an area of international law where you can really see the impacts of youth advocacy. As a sort of moment of background, losses and damages from climate change, of course, occur worldwide, but they are far more severe in the global south. And tragically, you really don't need to look far to see that in 2025. Just last week, Cyclone Melissa ravaged Jamaica, and Cyclone Melissa would not have been so serious without human-induced climate change, which, put very simply, I'm sure Piers could tell you this much better than I can, which warms the oceans and fuels stronger cyclones. So loss and damage sits at the crux of climate injustice. Those who are most affected by it are least responsible for the problem. And youth advocacy has been central to bringing loss and damage into focus at the UNFCCC by emphasising climate justice as a guiding principle of the regime. The Loss and Damage Youth Coalition, for example, brings together activists aged under 35 from across the world in advocating for climate reparations, justice and radical mitigation. And it was an essential part of the movement which led to the recent establishment of the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage at the UNFCCC itself. On a more directly practical note, the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition is also responsible for managing grants which are given to youth-led organisations in vulnerable countries. And those grants are worth up to $50,000. So they kind of have a direct impact as well as a policy impact themselves. Another really striking example of youth impact on climate policy recently is the International Court of Justice advisory opinion on the obligations of states in relation to climate change. And for the first time, this recognised that high-emitting countries have a legal duty to make full reparation for climate impacts in other countries. So, in other words, the world's highest court recognised the legal legitimacy of climate reparations. And that advisory opinion began with the activism of 27 law students from the University of the South Pacific, whose request for an advisory opinion from the ICJ was eventually taken up by the Tuvalu government and in turn taken up by the UN General Assembly. While the ICJ is the world's top court, this judgment is non-binding and kind of relevantly for what we're talking about here today, it was made outside the UNFCCC. But nonetheless, the negotiations under the UNFCCC at COP30 and beyond will now proceed against the background of this historic decision by the ICJ, heavily informing acceptable international norms and negotiating positions at the UNFCCC. And this only happened because of youth advocacy. In my own research, I explore not only how future climate impacts, but also current climatic hazards affect future generations. These hazards, ones like Cyclone Melissa, which have already happened, are not just one-off time-delimited disasters, but they create cascading harms over time by destabilizing communities, undermining food systems, forcing people into harmful coping mechanisms, and creating government debts. This shows why advocating for the rights of future generations is vital for creating just climate futures, and why young people must be central to those conversations because, put very simply, we have the highest stake in the future. I hope I've given a pretty comprehensive, albeit very brief, rundown of why youth representation matters so immensely at COPs, but it's also worth noting here that meaningful engagement by young people is very challenging. Unlike older delegates who are often funded by their employers, young people often attend COPs as unpaid volunteers, covering costs themselves or finding informal networks to find accommodation. Even when we are able to attend, young people are not a homogenous group. And in order for youth to be genuinely represented within the UNFCCC, it's essential to recognise the different knowledges, experiences, positionalities and backgrounds which different young people will bring. All of that underlines why youth advocates and negotiators are so indispensable to the UNFCCC. So I will finish with a very short plea, because I think I'm at time, which is that if you are a student at the university interested in climate activism, but sort of unsure where to start, then please always feel free to send myself or Matthias an email, because sort of in our capacity as youth representatives, we'd always welcome the opportunity to kind of share with you information and opportunities about climate change. So I'll hand back to Debbie. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gina. That's fantastic. And there's already a question about people being able to, how can people get involved further with the UNFCCC? And it's great to hear some positive progress as well as all the challenges that we're all facing as well from the youth side. So I'm just going to move on and very briefly talk about some of the other members of our delegation who will be attending COP. So we have the most diverse delegation going to a COP summit, either in person or online, than we've ever had before from the University of Leeds. These are most of the people who are going on these next couple of slides, and their research covers a really varied range of topics from AI and wildfires to climate change and adaptation. I'm just going to highlight a couple of people who will be there. So Sophie, whose picture is up here, is a lecturer in climate change education, and he has an event in the Higher Education Pavilion on working with Indigenous communities as a tool for climate action. And also, actually not on this slide at the moment, but there will be details on the webpage, we have Victoria Spazer, a professor in Polis, who will be talking at several events at COP30 about her latest global tipping point report and how tipping points in climate can lead to societal impacts as well. So for both of these slides, I'll just go flip back one so you can see those people again. We have a huge amount of information on the Priestley Centre website, including profiles of the delegates and their interests and what their hopes and concerns are for COP30. So do take a look at the website, and you'll also find details of all the events that we've been mentioning today on the website as well, along with other information. And so with that, I'm going to hand back to Jason, who's going to lead the Q&A session. So please continue to put your questions in the Q&A function as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Debbie. Can Can we take the slide window down as well, just so we can see people? I think COP is all about people, and it's great to see so many people online. I'm looking at the Q&A. We've got a mix of questions that have been coming in and questions that we had pre-prepared. I'm thinking actually we can put a couple of these together. So the first ones I'd like us to take are around what advice might we give for researchers who want to get involved in COP? But also, I want to link to that, how will online delegates ensure their voices are heard in the negotiations? I wondered whether we might start with Ruth, perhaps you might like to come in on this, because you're having to navigate this view of online engagement, but also with people on the ground linked. But I'd also like to ask Matthias and Catriona as well, their views on these two questions. Let's start there. Ruth, over to you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jason. Yeah, it's a really good question. I think online participation in COP looks a bit different every year, and I think we're still waiting to see exactly what it's going to look like for this COP in Brazil. So we're hoping that we will be able to participate, or at least view some of the side events that are happening at COP through the online participation, but we're not quite sure yet. But we're very happy that we have peers there. So we do have a couple of people from Leeds attending COP in person, as Debbie mentioned. I think if you want to showcase research at COP, it can be quite difficult to submit and get participation in side events. I think that one of the reasons our side event was successful was because we partnered with lots of different organisations, so that really helped us. Another thing I'd say is, I can't tell who's actually online and where you're from, for example. But if you're a postgraduate student, it is also possible to do internships at COP. I did an internship at COP during my master's, and that span over the summer months. So I was able to attend the intersessionals, which happened in May in Germany, and then I attended the COP that was in Bonn, hosted by Fiji. I can't remember which year it was, sorry. But that's another way to get active in COPs as a master's student as well, and you can end up linking your research and your final project, as I did, within those COP participations as well. So that's
Thanks,
just
Ruth.
a couple of ideas.
Matthias and Catriona, do you want to give a couple of brief thoughts on this? I want to fit quite a few questions in, but I'd really value your views on this topic.
Trina can say the online, and I can say the face-to-face there.
Go for it.
This might be sort of jumping in a slightly unhelpful way, but I also wondered if I could sort of link it more generally to the question that's in the chat and the Q&A about kind of young people who want to sort of be involved in COP but aren't necessarily attending. On kind of online.
Do.
Yeah, just because I kind of wanted to emphasize that not attending COP is like absolutely fine and doesn't diminish your involvement in sort of climate policy more generally at all. I actually did, but I think what Ruth was saying about kind of working through different organizations and finding connections to different organizations is a really meaningful way to still be connected to COP without attending or kind of being involved in UNFCCC work directly. I was maybe my most involved in a COP for COP26, but I didn't actually go to COP26. I was involved in a youth-led climate journalism organisation called Climate Talk, and we sort of ran a delegation to COP26. So I sort of helped do publicity, like articles, live events about the COP. And I'd say, like I say, through organisations, through the like the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition, organisations like Climate Talk, there are really ways to be involved in the COP meaningfully through other organisations, particularly youth-led organisations. And I think it's easiest maybe to identify those organisations if you sort of pick one or two issues that you're particularly interested in. Obviously now I work in loss and damage, but there are endless others that you could kind of be engaged in and sort of connect with the UNFCCC process through those organisations.
I never participate online, so I cannot advise how to engage online. I am Brazilian, so I like to see people face to face and But what I can say is we, the youth, are organizing a massive protest manifestation on the 15th of November. It's going to be really around 9 or 10 because it's really warm. It's like 30 degrees in the morning. And I would like you to watch and see the people from your country, what they are doing, all the youth mobilization there, because the other COPs, 29, 28, 27, we were not able to protest. We were not able to go to the roads, to make noise, to speak loud. But this time we were. The last time that I was in a protest was in the COP26, where you guys are in the UK. But now I am happy that I can scream and say loud for climate justice, for climate adaptation, for climate mitigation. And that's the most important thing, in my opinion. So thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. If you've got something you could put in the chat, so people could find out more about that, I think that would be welcomed by the audience. Right, I'm going to take two of the questions now, and the first part of it I'm going to direct at Piers, and the second part I'm going to direct at Richard. And Debbie, feel free to add to it if you wish as well. So Piers, I wanted to pick up on the one, where is the politics in the UK heading? And especially, are we veering away or towards stronger climate leadership? And then Richard, if you could come in on the question that focuses on USA, China and India, and how that will impact on the outcomes of COP. I think that would be a good way to move the discussion forward. So Piers, over to you first.
Yeah, I think superficially, we're certainly leaning into our role as kind of climate leaders. So if you do have a look at it, we have set probably the most ambitious 2035 NDC target of any country. Keir Starmer sent that on our Climate Change Committee advice last year, and he decided to go to the COP conference in person as well. He's going to be one of the few international leaders to be there in person to really push it, and we are sending a big group of negotiators and sending a lot of kind of ministers, Keir Starmer, Ed Miliband, Katie White, and others are all going to be out there taking part in the negotiations, and and we've been doing a lot of diplomatic negotiation behind the scenes about with Brazil and the Chinese, but so I think if you look at it that way, we are still trying, because we do still have a very internationally facing cabinet, but I think if you look one level underneath that, things are a bit fragile now. Just because we're all so obsessed by the economy and economic growth, of course, as a country, and sort of that does create an issue about how much you're really comfortable supporting countries, and especially the overseas paid component. We're just coming up to the end of our financial commitment on that currently. And there isn't much guarantee that will continue. So I think it's definitely there. Our international leadership is still there and definitely good words, but I'm kind of not sure it will continue to be there financially, and that I guess one of the big kind of tenets of the COP negotiations, which really is the financial commitment for everyone to kind of to try and put into COP.
Thanks, Piers. I mean, I guess my own reflection, I would agree with pretty much everything you've said on the mitigation side. I personally think we could be more visible on some of the adaptation discussions as we were maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. I'm going to hand to Richard. Richard, if you could do your answer in 3 minutes, that would be great, because then it allows us to do a brief reflection and finish on time so people can get to their lunch breaks.
Yeah, no, I'll do it in less than 3 minutes, okay? I think it's a good question, but I presume it's related to the leaders who won't be there, yeah? The Chinese, obviously the US leadership won't be there, but Matthias is suggesting maybe Lula will go and grab him and drag him down. It'll be an interesting coup if he does. So it's the leaders who will not be there. Negotiating teams are there. So I think one can say the following. One, it clearly has an effect on the optics of and the momentum of COP30 as the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. That is obvious, and you can hear that in the media. That there's already a sense that this isn't going to go very well. I think we have to wait and see, because the UNFCCC program and the negotiating teams are all in place, and they will deliver as well as they can. And thirdly, the Brazilian presidency is going to try and compensate for that lack of leadership, as I sort of said earlier. I think it's very concerned on implementation, less on optics. It wants things done. And we're going to have to see, what kind of coalitions actually the Brazilian diplomacy. Piers has just talked about some diplomacy going on behind the scenes between the UK and Brazil. I think Brazil is doing an awful lot, and they are very good climate diplomats. So I think we need to see what outcomes come out from both the fact that all the teams are there, even if the leaders are not, and secondly, we've got a very proactive presidency which is looking for effective coalitions, that is issues based, and is trying to basically set up important platforms for international cooperation. I think that can do, Jason. That would be my response.
Brilliant. Fantastic, Richard. So we obviously have got more questions than we've got time today. What I think I'd like us to do is any question we haven't answered, if the team and the delegation could have a look to see if there's a question that you're able to answer, and can we answer that offline so people can pick it up asynchronously, because I think it'd be great if everyone who's asked a question could maybe get at least some of the response. So we'll try and pick up that offline. In the last 2 minutes, we're going to take a couple of reflections. I'm going to start with Debbie, then I'm going to go to Richard. So your reflection on this year's COP, and a particular question of what are you most optimistic about for COP? Debbie first.
Very briefly, I'm very optimistic about, from a personal perspective, about the work that Piers is going to be presenting directly to the UNFCCC negotiators, which hopefully will see the science, the latest science updates informing the discussions. So I'm really optimistic that they will be led by the science.
Fantastic. Richard.
Well, just as is reflected actually in this webinar, and I think we've all been speaking to the diversity of the delegation that is going, and the fact that many of us are engaged in this across the university, and that's symbolized by the number of people who are coming in here. I really do think that this COP is going to be, it goes a bit back to what Matthias was saying. The engagement's going to be very diverse. We're clearly disappointed by the political leadership, returning to Piers and what I was saying. Political leadership is poor at the moment, and we're waiting to see where China situates itself in the coming years. But there are many diverse actors involved in this COP, and the Brazilian presidency is really foregrounding that diversity of engagement and agency, and that is where I put a lot of the hope.
Excellent. I mean, for me personally, I think firstly, it's so encouraging to see just how broad the engagement is, and how the COP process is listening to a wider range of people. I think it's encouraging that where nations are perhaps not stepping up at a state level, that other actors in those nations are actually coming forward and being vocal, and suggesting positive steps that I think align with the aims of COP. Piers, I'm going to give you the final word. What makes you optimistic?
I just want to really appreciate everyone's support they've done for this UNFCCC collaboration to try and influence the negotiation and try and get things done. And what I want us to do is just use this as one way we interact with the whole kind of policy international community. I sort of think to really get climate action everywhere, we have to engage at lots of different levels, from the level of our own community to the level of international communities to everything. So but I think this gives us a really good grounding in coming from the international negotiation that hopefully try and kind of change the world. So I want to kind of thank you all for your kind of support, basically.
Fantastic.
And thanks to Debbie for organising too, as always.
Debbie, is there anything we need to do to close down the event?
I think we just need to, I just need to thank all of you panellists for your varied perspectives. Thank you to the organising team in the Priestley Centre for making this happen. The recording will be available on the Priestley website as well. And as Jason said, we'll try and get back to everyone who's asked a question. And keep an eye on our website and social media throughout COP, and we'll be posting updates as well. Thanks to the audience for coming, and we'll close this webinar now. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Obrigado.